Good morning and welcome to Vivid Session. Our presenter today is Damien Horner. Damien is the architect on the NNMI performance component known as the Network Performance Servers, or NPS. Some of you will already know him through LinkedIn group Network Management Solutions or have watched his product demos on YouTube. Damien has been building network management software for 20 years and has been with HP for the last 12. He is based in Northern Ireland and is joining us from there today. Good afternoon, Damien.
Hi there. How are you?
So let's go through the logistics slides. Oops, sorry, I'm having technical difficulties here. I'm the organizer, Wendy Wheeler. I'm with HP, and I'm the SIG leader. Next slide. We've already talked about Damien. Next slide. This is a live session is being recorded. Recordings are available to all Vivid members. Throughout the session, you can ask questions in the question pane, and we definitely encourage people to ask questions. Next slide. Housekeeping, no, same thing. There we go. Toggle view window you can see on your panels. You can put it in full screen mode, and down at the bottom you can see the questions and chats. Next slide. Agenda is architecture, launching from NNMI, usage overview, creating report views, scheduling, and QA. And I guess I'll hand it over to Damien.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Wendy. So, as it was mentioned, my name is Damien Horner, and I think the promise on the call was that you would go from 0 to hero in an hour. And, well, I can't promise that you'll all be heroes, but I hope we'll get a lot of the functionality of the Network Performance Server, or NPS, covered during the next 45 minutes or so, and give ourselves some time at the end. So what I'll do is I'll give you just a quick chat on what the architecture is, how the platform sits together with NNM, and then we'll go into looking at launching your reports from NNMI, how you actually select topology, etc., and move across and then bring up historical reports for your network elements. We'll talk about just general usage of the product, how you make your selections, change your metrics. We'll look at creating report views to help you speed up your targeted reports, making the selections that you want and then having them automatically scheduled and delivered to you. And we'll finish off with Q&A. But I will say that as we go through this, if you have specific questions or features in the product that you'd like me to focus on, then just type them in and make them known, and we'll take account of that as we go, because it's going to be a live demo the whole way through. And I'm perfectly open to taking your thoughts and suggestions into account as we move through it. So just to give you an idea of what the Network Performance Server is, it sits alongside NNM. It's often installed on a separate platform, or it could be installed in the same one as NNM, but for larger networks it's going to be installed using a different installation mechanism on a different machine from NNM. And then once you have it installed, it's going to give you access to reports for example, your traffic data, your metrics data. We call it metrics, but we're really talking here about your interface, your components, your frame and ATM data. You're going to have QA reports in here as well. We also have packages for IP telephony and MPLS, etc. So this NPS isn't actually a product as such. It's a foundation component that provides the historical storage and reporting and aggregation, etc., of your data. And it's tightly coupled with NNMI. And just my final slide here before we move into the demo part of this is to show you that when you're within the traditional NNM console and you've made some sort of a selection, perhaps you're looking at a list of incidents or you're looking at a topology map, then at any stage there, if you have something selected, you can go to Actions and drop down to the HP NNM iSPI Performance and move across and go to Reporting Report menu. And that brings you in, it'll open up a new browser and it brings you into the reporting console where you can then launch the reports. So let me just move to that. I hope you can see my screen here. I'm running today's demo just off a virtual platform that looks at our test network located in one of our development offices. And this has been set up by one of my colleagues, so I can't really go and change an awful lot on it because he he wants to keep it for again. But we're looking here at Network Node Manager, and he's gone and created a couple of little networks representing a main office and a branch office. And so at any point here, I could, for example, select a node, and I'll see data coming up below here in the analysis panes, and I can see performance data if I want to as well. So there are aspects of the performance data that are fully integrated into the NNM main console. But what I want to focus on is the separate set of reports, the Network Performance Server reports. So this performance window is just filling up here with some of the little charts. So there's performance data appearing right within NNM. But we can also go and hit Actions, drop down here. Didn't do that quickly enough. My little menu disappeared on me. Okay, and I can click on Reporting, Report Menu. And a new browser opens up on my screen. So what's happening at the minute is it's opened up the browser and it's populating this report tree on the left-hand side. You'll have seen it sort of build itself out there. And I'll just close up these branches of my tree so that we can see what we have at the top level. So this is my report list. And each package that I install onto NNM, each performance data package or extension pack will come with a series of folders. So the main one that most people will see is the iSPI metrics, and that's where I tend to focus when I'm demonstrating parts of the product. But you can also see the quality assurance package has been installed here and the iSPI traffic. You'll see that there's a folder here for custom collections, and we'll come back and talk about those. And there's also a quick launch report views, which probably should be your first port of call once you become familiar with the product, because this is where we store quick launch reports that you've made a selection, and then you very quickly get to some data that will give you value as soon as possible. But let's just look at this iSPI metrics. So this is the one, the product, when it's installed with NNM, will almost always have iSPI metrics on it. And you see that there are 4 folders here: interface health, component health, frame, and ATM. And your interface health, that's all the mid-2 stuff, and it also includes wireless LAN and some other types of metrics in there too. But primarily, you're looking here at utilization, discards, etc. So let me just click on chart detail. So what I've done is I'm launching a report. And the report's been sent into the server, and it includes, every report when it runs will include time, topology, and metric selections. So the time range, that's the interval that I want to examine my data for. And the topology will be the item in my network that I want to view the data for, to filter the report on. And also then there's the metric. Well, what metrics did I choose? In this case, my report has come up, and it's just used the last ones that I ran with, which were utilization, discards, and then also volume. So every report has those 3 main factors included in it. And I'm going to step through where you make those selections. So I'm going to invite questions just now as we're looking at this. If there are any there in the background, then now would be a good time.
There are. What version of iSPI is being shown?
This is the 9.20 version with patch 3 on it. So this is the very latest publicly available system.
Great, thank you. And that's all the questions we have at this time.
Okay, all right. And if you are running 9.20 and you don't have the latest version, the latest set of patches on, then I strongly encourage you to get them on, because they include all sorts of defect fixes and little enhancements that we've noticed and made to the product. And our patches are always certainly well worth keeping up to date with. So we're looking at this chart detail report. This is your most standard report. It's a time series chart running from left to right across the screen. And although I didn't make any time selection when I was running it, you can see that it's come up here. I've got this filter link at the top, and it tells me that it's for the last hour. And it's giving me the time frame 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. October the 1st. So it's telling me that that's the most recent hour that's in the system. And that's based upon the time, the server time. You can, of course, change your time zones, etc. And you'll notice here as well that it says node name equals this particular node, and that happens to be the one that I clicked on when I was launching from NNM. So in clicking on that node and launching across, that's the first selection that I made. I made a topology selection when I did that. I could equally have launched from an incident, and we'll go back towards the end of the demo and look and see if there are any interesting incidents that have happened in the test network in the last while, and if we can, if there's anything worthwhile launching on them, we can use that. So I've made a topology selection here in NNM, and unknowingly a time selection was made for me last 1 hour. Let's have a look how we might change that time selection. So I'm going to click down here on the time control in the navigation panel on the left-hand side. And it gives me some information about how much data there is available to me. And it talks about detail, hourly, and daily. And that's because you can change the time periods, the total length of time that you're going to store your data for. And that has an impact on your storage requirements for your system. If you leave it just out of the box, I think you're talking 800 days is the total duration of the time of the data that's stored there by default. But you can change those. That's just to let you know that there are limits to the amount of data that you have stored, and you can't go back indefinitely. But the main controls that you're going to use for adjusting your time period are just below that. And here it's already selected relative start. So that's telling me that when my report runs, it's going to show me data relative to right now. And the interval it's showing me is the last rolling 1 hour. And I can drop this down and I can say, show me the last rolling 1 day, for example. And when the report runs, it's going to bring me from, say, 8 a.m. yesterday up until 8 a.m. today, because it's a rolling 24-hour period. If I want to, when the report runs here, I can change this interval. I can change this, and instead of saying show me the last rolling, I can say show me the most recent complete. So here's my report has completed there with the last rolling 1 day, and it's going from 9 until 9. 8 p.m. or 8 a.m. is the last sample, representing 1 hour from 8 until 9. So it's a full 24-hour period that we're looking at here. If I wanted to, I could change this and say most recent complete. And if I press submit again, what's going to happen is the report will run, but it will show me data for the most recent complete day, which will be yesterday. So I'll expect to see this coming up and saying 12 until 12, or 12 until 11 actually. Let's just have a look at it when it comes up. So it's going from 00 to 23. So fairly reasonable and easy to follow there. You might have noticed that when I changed my interval here from 1 hour to 1 day, the grain of the data, the number of samples and the distance between each sample changed. So with a 1 day interval, that's given me a default grain of 1 hour. If I change this down to be, say, 2 hours, then the grain adjusts. And the system makes a selection for you, but you are open to changing that yourself. So it's suggesting that with 2 hours worth of data, I probably want to go for 5 minutes, which again would give me 24 samples. I can select that and go 15 minutes though, and press submit, and I'll expect to see 8 sample points across the chart. There's a real tendency for folks to make the grain as small as possible because they want to see the finest grain that they possibly can. But often that's not very helpful, to be honest. It makes the charts very, very cluttered, and it takes the system longer to render them because it has to go through and build the data points and draw the lines, etc. So typically, unless you really have a need to select a very fine grain, I would just stick with what the system suggests for you. Because you can always zoom in if there's a particular data point that's interesting to you. And you're going to get the same value from the chart, especially if you're looking at something like a percentage type metric like utilization. The average is going to be the average anyway, it's just you'll see it in finer grain if you're changing it. So just bear in mind that as you change this grain here, you might run into having far more data points than you really need. So that's one top tip there. Hopefully you're all well on your way to becoming heroes now. Let me just switch over to the relative start to be no, and quickly show that you can select your own start and end time. And this opens up a little calendar widget. So you do have complete control over the start and end time of the chart, whether you want it to roll with you or stick with a certain time frame. And another thing that I would suggest is when we come on to the scheduling and you're scheduling your own reports, bear in mind that there's no point in fixing a start and end time for a scheduled report because it will always just give you the same data. So scheduled reports in general should have a relative start time so that they move with the scheduler and keep up to date with the latest data that's coming into the system. One last little thing that's worth looking at here is the hour of day and day of week selectors. If, for example, I wanted to say, give me the last week, but I only want the working week, then I could say Monday to Friday here and press submit. And what I'm expecting to see then is 5 data points. And this applies as well for longer running reports. If you get it to run, say, and show you your top 10 interfaces over the course of a month, but you only want it for your business hours, then you can do that. So here's my day of week that I made a selection for, and look up here along my little filter bar here that tells me the choices that have been made in rendering this report. We see the days of the week are spelled out, and there's also the node name. So that's all about selecting time. I'm going to look now at some of the options, but if there are any questions, then again I can answer them, or anything that someone wants to look at in more detail just while we're here.
Yes, I have 3 questions at this time.
Okay.
Is 9.20 the version that will give the ability to show performance data graphs in the NNMI window?
Yes, there are some performance metrics that will appear within the NNMI window. They're typically called the performance workbench. That's the term that we use. And there's also the analysis pane, which was a little chart that was appearing down below earlier on when I clicked on the node.
Great. Can version 9.2 be run with NNMI 9.11? No. In general, in fact, always we suggest that you keep the versions in sync with each other. So when you're upgrading one, you upgrade the other. Does NNMI and iSPI versions have to be the same level? Okay, so you just said yes.
Yes,
same question coming in. Sorry.
Definitely. Because there's some. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, is there any plans to support MS SQL or Oracle as a DB?
No. The database that comes with the system is completely embedded in it. So hopefully you won't have any need to interact with it, and it shouldn't have any impact in terms of needing your own DBAs or anything, but it is Sybase IQ. And we use that because it's able to cope with the scale of data that we need inside the NPS.
Great. Next question. They keep rolling in. Is there any, hi, we collect data across the world. Is it possible to have the time zones in GMT plus hour?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can shift your time zone here and show the data from your point of view. So the data is collected and by default will appear in server time. And but if I wanted to, I can switch to Europe, Moscow, and press, and we should see the time zone change. This is a feature that I rarely use because it tends to, the system has to do a bit of a shift as it's collecting the data, so it makes the reports run very slightly slower while it makes that shift. But you can see there, well actually we won't have seen any difference in terms of, because the report that I ran is a daily grain, so you can't see the time zone. But you can see there that it's shifted to Europe, Moscow.
And the last question, is there tuning doc available?
I don't know if there's one available publicly, but certainly if there are specific problems that someone's having or they feel that they need to tune their system in some way, then get in touch with support and they'll supply you with any help that you need.
Oh, one more question just came in. What is server time?
Server time will be the time zone of the system that's running NPS.
Okay.
Or NNM, actually.
And that's all the questions we have at this time.
Okay, excellent. All right, so we've talked a lot about time there, but like I said earlier, there are 3 primary components to setting up your report. So the next one that we might want to look at is topology. And I made a topology selection when I launched from NNM earlier on. We've got the node name up here at the top. But I might want to refine that in some way or change it. So there is a topology filter. And you can see here it says what my current filter is. And up at the top as well, it says, because I can't always see into this topology filter panel, so at any stage I can see that the filter is set. If I had launched without making a selection in NNM, then this filter would say unset. And all of my reports would be running for my entire network, which sometimes you might want to do, but chances are most of the time you're going to want to have that filter set in some way or another to restrict the data that you're looking at, because typically reports across the whole network aren't very helpful unless you're looking for exceptions or something and wanting to zoom in on them. So let me just launch this topology selector. And the topology selector, each extension pack that we work with, so at the minute I'm looking at the interface health, each extension pack will have a list of topology attributes that are appropriate for it. So in interface health, you can see that you might want to filter by node name, for example, but you might also want to filter by qualified interface name. You might want to have chosen a very specific interface, or by the interface type. Let me just open up my node name selector. So there's, beside each topology attribute here, you can see there are 4 little icons. The first one hides the selector for that attribute, and at the minute they're all currently hidden. The next one shows me a single value select. So you would typically use this type of selector for something that doesn't have a very large number of potential values. In our network here, there tends to be, I think there's the order of 150 nodes. It's not particularly large. So I can see here that a single value select actually works very well for me. And I can scroll up and down and make my choices if I wish. You might, however, want to look at a multi-value select. And let me just open up the node vendor for that. And I think we've got 4 node vendors on this network. Let's just wait and see. So this allows me to select multiple values at any time. Now the reason why we're only seeing 1 here, Hewlett-Packard, is because the node that I have selected is Hewlett-Packard. So when I make a selection in one of these widgets, it affects the values that are in the other. And that's very deliberate because that allows me then to sort of filter down and whittle down what it is that I'm looking for by making selections. So if I want to open up my node vendor and look at all of the vendors, I just reset that single value and press apply on it, and it's going to refresh the screen, and this time I should see all of my vendors. So I must say that a lot of folks don't really come near this the screen because they're making their selections within NNM, and as a result, they're not really needing to refine the reports using this screen. They're making the selections in NNM, and then they're possibly drilling down through the reports and selecting particular topology attributes at that stage as well. And we'll come to drill through in just a few minutes' time. So you can see here, if I want to select all of my Cisco devices, I can press apply, and this node name filter will be restricted to just the Cisco ones in a second. And up it comes, and there are fewer than there were before, although you may not appreciate that on the phone, but that is the case. So I've selected Cisco, and the last type of selector that I might have is the search and select, and this really is, it's a much larger widget on the screen, and it allows me to go in and type in part names for nodes, or, well, for whatever attribute you open it up against, and you can then search for things using that. So you can see here it's got the full type in a keyword, press search, you'll get a list of results, and then you can insert them into your selection. So I'm just going to leave it that it's selected Cisco for now, and I'm going to press finish. And that's how you make topology selections within the report. If you're going and wishing to sort of manually search for a particular item, then that's the screen that you would use for it. And you get it there from Launch Topology Selector. You'll also get it if you decide to run your report and go through each of the individual prompts. Then you'll see that each report includes a prompt page, a pre-run page that looks just like that topology selector. So now in my report that's been run, it's looking at the most recent week. However, it's filtered to Monday to Friday, and my selection here is node vendor, which equals Cisco. So it's actually not a particularly interesting report, but it's turning out this way just because of the selections I'm making. Now, the last thing that I want to look at that affects all reports is the options here. So at the minute, the last time I ran this report, I had utilization average, discard rate average, and volume. And there are two different axes. You can see here on the left-hand side, on the Y1 axis, as we call it, it's in percentage. And on the Y2, we have the volume, which is just a very large number. So when you're making your selections for what to place inside your report, it is a good idea to think about the data that you're trying to place on each axis, and make sure that you don't mix and match, for example, a utilization with a volume, because the system won't be able to sensibly draw you a volume value of whatever that is, 1.4 billion, against the utilization value that is actually represented as between 0 and 1, meaning a percentage value. So I can show up to 6 values on each of the axes. So any report can end up with up to 12 different things charted on it. And I add more to my Y1 axis by pressing this little plus sign that says Add New Metric. So as I add a metric, a new item appears. I might want to, for example, show the discard max. And I can add another one, and I can show the discard rate min. And similarly over here, I can add new metrics if I wish as well. I'm not going to, though. I'll just leave it at that. And lastly, each report has an options page. Each of these generic reports have an options page. And some of them also have other features in here where you can, for example, on this chart detail, you can say, do you want the chart and the table, or do you just want the chart, or do you just want the table? And that allows you to make a few report-specific selections. So I'll press that confirm. While that's building the report, do we have any questions at the minute there, Wendy?
We do. What is the maximum data retention period in iSPI?
It's 800 days.
Thank you. And that's all the questions we have at this time.
Okay, excellent. So I've generated that report. You can see here that I've got my selections utilization. The 3 different discards have appeared. And then I've got my volume. Now, we're now 27 minutes into this call, and I've spent, say, roughly 20 minutes just examining the report and looking at different choices that I could make. If you're an operator and you've seen an incident on a node, chances are you want to be able to go and examine data for that node very quickly. And you probably always want to look at, for example, the last rolling day or the last rolling hour if you're looking more near term with a certain grain selected already. And you might have other selections or groupings that you're keen to make. And we want to be able to speed that process up for you. So the way that you do that is when you've set your report up the way you like it, then the best thing to do is to say keep this version over here on the right-hand side. And this is a key feature in the 920 version of the product. We've always had this concept of report views, but they've been sort of hidden underneath the covers, and we haven't really brought them to the fore. But 920 brings this idea of report views right up there front and central so that you make use of them, and it really it should speed up maximize your use of the product. So let me just click on this, keep this version, and we can do save as report view. I'm going to click here.
Can I ask a quick question?
Absolutely.
Is it possible to increase the size of the graph in the chart window?
No, the graph size would be fixed. I mean, as you move the browser, it doesn't shrink and reduce or shrink or expand as you do that. It's a fixed size chart.
Great, thank you. That's all.
Okay. So I have the choice of saving my report view either into a public area or into my own personal area, and I'm going to select my folders. And this is based upon my username that I logged into NNM with. So up in the top left-hand side, you can see current status, and you can see the user is Damien. And so it's going to save it into my user area, and I'll just press OK. So now, when I want to, I can come back and run this report exactly as it was. So let me just show you. I'm going to close up this window, or these branches on my tree. Here's my folders. Now my report that I just saved, my report view, won't be in here yet. I've got lots and lots of examples that I'm going to show you in a minute here of reports that I've built before. But the one that I just saved to demonstrate creating a report view isn't there yet because this tree hasn't been refreshed. So I want to press the little refresh button. It takes a second while it makes a request to the system saying, send me back the data to build the tree, and then it's going to start and build it out here. And this normally happens by default just when you open up your browser, this request and build out happens. So my folders is building out, and report view of chart detail. Now there's two things that can happen here. I can simply click on report view of chart detail, and that report will run with the same selections that I had that I've created there in terms of the days of the week, hour of the day, topology selections, and metric choices, which is all well and good, and that's probably what you want to do a lot of the time. However, you can go one step further and you can schedule these report views. So let's just wait and see. Okay, so here's a report view. It's just been run dynamically. It's accessed the data from the database. It's a daily grain report, so it's not going to have changed since the last time we saw it. However, it did take a number of seconds to execute there. If I want to, though, when I made this save, it saves not just my choices, but it also saves the instance of the report view at the time that I made the initial save. So every report view has its first instance already saved with it. And that's what these little sort of multiple page icons mean here. So I can right-click on this, and I can say Show Versions. It's only going to have one version. I can say View the latest saved version. And when I click on this, it's going to come up almost instantly. So I click, the screen refreshes, and up it comes. And that is a key feature there, because what you realize when you do that is that if you only scheduled your report views, you could look at them instantly. So for example, up here at the top, here's availability and reachability using the component help headline. And I had that running on a schedule. So now I can just say, view the latest saved version, and up it comes. And this is one of our headline reports. This one contains multiple charts, and is probably a key report for going to if you have a node problem, because this gives you an overview of everything that's going on a node from a component health point of view. So we're looking at our ICMP response time, we're looking at availability versus reachability, we're looking at memory utilization, CPU, buffers, backplane, and disk. So all the information that we can get regarding a particular node is selected here in this report view. And you'll see at the top that when I saved this particular report view, I had selected some topology items, some particular nodes. But you could just as easily make your selection for a node in NNM and then jump across and look at it. So I'm going to jump into creating a schedule now, but are there any questions there on report views?
Yes, there is. What is the advantage in integrating iSPI with SHR?
Well, SHR is really sort of addressing different needs. iSPI is very much focused on the network data, whereas SHR includes packages from other domains. And it's less focused on network, so it's not providing you with the near real-time data for the network side. So they're really addressing different aspects.
Great. And the next question, if a top-end report runs, is it possible to scale each report? In 9.1, it scales according to the first chart, and the others might become very hard to read because of that.
Well, I think I'm interpreting that question to mean, let me just show you a top-end report. So this top-end report I'm going to show you now is one that we built using the QA package, and it's targeted at showing your SLA culprits. So we've got a list of QA probes right down here. Each probe name has a probe type and a source and destination and round-trip time in milliseconds. So this is attempting to really help you highlight your quality problems on the network. Now, the question referenced top N, and it implied that there were multiple charts here, but they would scale according to the first. And I think probably maybe the question means that the first line here, if it's particularly high, then the others will be small and will be compressed down below. If whoever asks the question, if you want to provide more information, I'll certainly try and help it. But the bottom line is there are no user-oriented ways to adjust the scaling on the charts. Basically, the system will render it as well as it possibly can, and that's what you get. And there's no way of tweaking it after the fact. So hopefully that answers the question.
All right. Next question. Can the report view be triggered to run as an action when an incident is registered?
That's not something that happens out of the box. And I've been asked that before. I know a gentleman who did manage to build something that did that using scripts, but it's not something that we supply out of the box. Certainly, I mean, you can create actions on NNM when an incident comes in, and you could, for example, attempt to prompt a report view to run, and you could have that report view delivered dynamically, but it's not something that you can just press a switch on and it's set up in the system.
Next question. Is there an easy way to know the date range of the data currently in the database? So that when
absolutely.
Okay.
Oh, well, in this time control, you can see that your data is available from and to, and you have the choice inside one of the configuration UIs for the system to tailor. You'll notice that available to is the same time. That's the latest sample. But the detailed data, that's the finest grain, and the hourly aggregated data and the daily data are they're set at different times. So the detailed data is 14 days. The hourly data is set here. I'm not sure what that time frame is. I have a feeling it defaults to 80. I'm not certain though. And the daily data does max out at 800 days, but in this case the system hasn't been running for 800 days, so there's a number of months in there.
And the next part of that question, so that we can know quickly if the data has stopped loading and can know how far back we have data. So I think you answered that.
Yeah. So if the data stops loading, let's say something happened to your iSPI and it stopped grabbing the data from NNM. NNM will still continue to produce the data. And when you resolve whatever the issue is with the iSPI, then it will attempt to claw it all back and process it. Now, there are limits, of course, because NNM only has a certain amount of disk space that it's going to save data into as it collects it. So you might find, I think it's set to 1 gig, and you might find that you blow that limit if you leave a large system running for too long without actually beginning to clear the data. And once NNM reaches the limit, then it's going to stop putting collections in there. But yeah, I mean, the system is as resilient as it can be. If you stop the iSPI, it will just try and pick itself back up once it starts again.
And then the last question, is it possible to create a report for a node group showing a graph per node in one report?
Absolutely, and that was the one thing that I wanted to look at right now. So you've given me a very nice segue into that. We'll come back and look at schedules in just 1 second, but I showed you a chart detail report there, and I didn't show you the chart detail is the most basic type of report. The other types are all there, and we're going to look at them in a second. But one of them is the top N, and within that, the top N chart report. So a top N report, let's have a quick look at one of those. So here's a top N report. We've got 10 interfaces listed down, and we're focused here on CRC errors, so LAN errors here. And we're looking at the min, max, and average for the FCS error rate. At the top N, basically it's showing us 10 rows within a table. Top N chart, though, takes this one step further, and it's going to show us 10 rows as well, but each row is represented with an individual chart. So here, you can see there's one chart per interface. So the person who asked that question, the way I would accomplish what he's asking for is I would go to my iSPI metrics. I would open up, let's say, interface health. I think the question was one row per node within a group. Was that it?
The question was, is it possible to create a report for a node group showing a graph per node in one report?
Okay, so there's 2 aspects to that question. The first is, how do you filter the data? The filter there is the node group. So we want to restrict the data to just be within one node group, and that's your topology filter. So that's the first thing. The second thing is the grouping of the data within the top N chart. And in that case, you're asking for one row, one little chart per node. So you need to look at the grouping construct within the top N chart report. Each of those top N reports include the ability to group the data. You know, in the one that I showed, in the demo that I showed there, it was showing 1 row per interface. But this person is asking for 1 row per node. So let's just have a quick look here, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. So this report has already been filtered by node vendor equals Cisco. So I'm just looking at only Cisco data. I could just as easily have set a topology filter to be node group equals routers, or node group equals my nodes, whatever it is. It doesn't really matter. That's the topology filter. The grouping construct is here, and you only see this in the top N in the tabular type reports. And I can set my grouping to be, for example, my first grouping might be by node vendor, my second grouping might be by node family, and then I'll make it by node name. So now I'm going to see all these attributes iSPI, node vendor, node family, and node name, and I press confirm. And of course, the time selections that I made still apply. The Monday to Friday selection that I made earlier on. So this report will run, and it will show us a series of charts, but hopefully the grouping meets the needs of that user. Are there any other questions there?
No questions at this time.
No questions at the minute. Okay. So, yeah, here's the report. You can see it's top 10 for node vendor, node family, and node name. And within each chart, there's my selection. So it's Cisco 2800, and then there's the particular node name. Here are all my metric choices that I made. And again, they're split by the Y1, Y2 axis, and my time selections are affecting the way that the dots are dispersed on my chart here. I really want to show you scheduling the report just before I finish, because I'm aware that, according to my clock, it's just after 22, and that gives me, say, another 10 minutes or so before I'll need to wrap up. So let's say we have we've created a report view for ourselves. I'm looking for a particular one here. I'm looking for a heat chart because it's different. We've seen top N, we've seen the chart detail. Here it is. Here's a heat chart. The heat chart is a different type of display from the others because it's showing us individual cells, and the color of the cell is determined by the value as it appears within the range. The min is the smallest value that was within the selection. The max is the largest value, and everything in between those two gets spread across green to red. So the red isn't here implying goodness or badness. It's simply implying that there is a range, a spread of values, and it's helping us focus in on exactly where the mins and maxes are. So it's just another way of displaying. Let's say that I wanted to schedule this. I would right-click on it, and I would go to Schedule. And that's going to bring up the scheduling interface. And at the minute, there's no schedule for this report. But I could, for example, click on the frequency here, click by day. And I might want to make it every 5 minutes. That would be a pretty aggressive schedule, but we're short on time. So we'll make it every 5 minutes. And we're going to look at the options here. I can open up the options. The default is to have HTML. I could also specify that I wanted, for example, PDF or some of the Excel options for CSV, for example. I can also select the delivery, and the delivery mechanism here saves the report inside the system. And with that then comes an implication of how many copies are we going to save as we create more and more of them. So the system will default to simply creating one and overwriting it every time. But you can adjust that and tell it to keep the last 10 copies, for example. And finally, you can select your delivery and tell it that you want it emailed. And if you choose to email your reports to yourself or to someone else, then you can, I think the screen is waiting to paint, and there it is, okay. Yeah, so you can set up the to and CC. You can include the report as an attachment or include it within the body of the report, or you can set up a link to it so the person who receives the email just links right back in and looks at the report within the system. So I'm not going to send an email at the minute, but you can see there that there's a lot of flexibility. We've got a scheduler for the frequency. We've got options to set up the format that we want, the delivery mechanism, and then finally, if you want to, you can set up prompt values. But a hint from me would be do not use the prompt values when you're setting up a schedule. It's much better to create a report view that includes the prompt values that you want, your topology, time, and measures, etc., and then set them there and save the name of the report view so that it indicates what it is that you created inside that. Because if you set them up inside the schedule, then it's not obvious to whoever runs the report. So we'll just click that. We've got PDF, and I'll just press OK. Oh, I don't want to do the email. So that's how I create a schedule of a report view. And what will happen is the system will now automatically kick that off. If I wanted to, it would be emailed to me every 5 minutes. I can just save it, etc., etc. And there's all the different formats as well. I had a series of other topics that I could go into. One of them was, for example, the custom collections. Another might be Query Studio. Are there any questions there that anyone wants to direct the last few minutes of the presentation?
There's only one question. Is it possible to manually delete data from the database?
Well, anything's possible. It's an open database. It's not that we're trying to restrict your access to it, but we certainly wouldn't suggest it. I think this type of thing normally comes up when someone, I'll give you an example of when you might want to do that. If you have scheduled an outage, or you've created, there's an outage has happened and you have forgotten to schedule it in the system, and therefore the data shows the nodes have gone out of action and then come back again a while later, and that perhaps is affecting some SLA reports that you have with your customers or something. And that's one instance where we hear that people like to be able, or they want to be able to go back and adjust the data. And that's a feature that we are developing. It's in active development. I can't really say more in terms of when it'll be delivered or anything, but that's a requirement we've heard before, and it's in active development. But there's no obvious way in the 920 system where you can go in and delete the data. And I would urge extreme caution if you decide to do that on your own.
Next question. Can you please show how to create a report in Report Studio?
Well, I'm not going to show Report Studio because there are two different types of reporting platforms that come with this. One is Report Studio, and it really is only meant for us. It's the fully featured report building platform that we use to create the reports that you see here. The other is the ad hoc reporting tool, which is Query Studio, and I can show that. Even if I were to show Report Studio, it would take a lot longer than a few minutes to walk through how to use it. It's quite an advanced product. But let me just quickly, I opened up the BI server there, the BI server panel. This is the gateway into the underlying system where I go and look at reports as they're stored inside in our BI platform. And one of the options here is Query Studio, and I clicked on that, and a new window opened. And this is the window that I'm presented with, and it shows me which package would I like to use. And I've used the interface health earlier on, so it's listed there in the recently used packages, so I'll just stick with that. Query Studio is going to allow me to create a report very quickly using data in the system. I will say, though, people often ask for demonstrations of how to use Query Studio, and I'm more than happy to show people how to use it, but there's very little that you can't accomplish with our out-of-the-box reports because you have the ability to slice and dice, to set up ranges on values in top end, to create charts and chart detail. You know, there's a lot of flexibility in the reports that we provide out of the box. So before you go trying to build your own in Query Studio, I would advise that you really try and go through each of the included reports and make sure that you understand what they can and can't do. So this is Query Studio. It's opened up the interface health package, and I can see that there's a whole list of different sources that I could go into here. The one starting with D are what I would call dimensions, and they, if you imagine that sort of a star schema, you've got your data in the middle, and then you've got dimensions around the outside, and the dimensions that hang off the data, that's your way of slicing and dicing the data. So when you're looking at your data, the first thing that I would always do is open up the data itself and then begin to slice and dice it. Now there's a top tip here as well. If you do happen to go in here, don't open up the dimension tables because there's no point. You shouldn't go there. What you should do is open up this F virtual interface metrics. This is the fact table. This is where all of your data is stored. And it's actually a completely denormalized table. So all of the dimensions that you want to slice and dice by, like time and your topology, are all represented in here anyway. So there's no need to go to these other tables. So just go to the fact table and ignore the other ones and open up your metrics. The first thing you should always do is select the metric that you want to see. Don't go and select the dimensions first, because if you select two dimensions and you haven't joined them, and I'm talking here in terms of the query that hits the database, if you haven't joined them with a fact, then what you might find is that your query to the database will run for a long time because the database is trying to make sense of how does it connect the topology and the time when it doesn't know which fact you want to run them through. So I'm going to open up volume here. Let's just click on volume, and I can drag it across, or I could just double click on it. And I've got a figure for volume, but well, it's not very helpful to me. It's not really telling me anything. It represents the entire network for the entire time frame that I have stored. So the first thing that I really want to do is divide that up in some way. So I might want to go into the time. And I've got all these different time intervals that I could select here. And I could, for example, say day. I can drag day across. And the system's kind of trying to drop it in at one side of volume or the other. So I can do that. Now I've got a list of days, and for each day I've got the volume that happened on that day. With this in place, I could, if I wanted to, go and say, show me a chart. I could say, give me a stacked chart, and press OK. And it's going to redraw this with a chart. So there's lots of things that you can do here. You can also do, for example, conditional rendering. I can right-click on my column here and say, define conditional styles. And I can say if the value is above a certain number, then give it that color, and if it's below a certain number, give it that color. And you can create these ranges, which I don't really have time to do now, unfortunately. I'm going to cancel that. Let me just also show you dividing this by one of the topology metrics. I might want to say node family, drag it across, and drop it in. So when I drop it in, it's now going to give me one value per day per node family. So this interface is meant as your easy access to your raw data that's under the covers. Of course, I should have gotten rid of that little chart because now it's trying to draw the chart with all of the days, the node families. So it's ended up with quite a complex chart, and that's what slowed that down in rendering there. And you can see that some of our agents obviously aren't behaving themselves. So I can do things like order. I can click on a column here, and I can order it using this little sort routine. I can also filter things and say, only show me this particular day or that particular node value. So I'm quite aware of time. If there's any final questions then?
Yeah, there are 2 additional questions. Where are configuration settings to adjust data retention and other values?
Okay, inside the bin directory, there's a script called run config GUI.obpl, I think is the name, and that will start up a configuration UI that allows you to adjust the retention periods.
And the next question is, will the schema for the database ever get published?
We don't publish the schema. Again, it's not that we're trying to hide it. If you connect to the Sybase database, you will be able to see the schema there, the tables, etc. It's not that we're attempting to restrict access to that, but we don't encourage it, I have to say, because once people start sending queries of their own in or attempting to remove the data in some way or another, then it puts a load in the system that we can't predict, and with that then potentially come performance problems. So we do prefer that people don't do that. And if you have a need in terms of wishing to export your data or report on it in some other way, then contact us and we'll give you the best advice on how to do that. Any others?
No other questions at this time.
Okay. All right. Well, I think that's the end of the demo. And just check my list. Oh, custom collections. That was one thing that I was going to talk about. I'll very quickly just use up the last couple of minutes. I talked earlier on about different extension packs and how they come out of the box. And we looked here at the metrics package, and we've got ATM and component health, frame, etc. You see here I've got quality installed, I've got traffic spy. But what happens when you buy some new equipment and the data from it isn't being collected by any of these packages? There are some SNMP OIDs that you particularly want to have recorded and stored and graphed and charted and plotted, and it's not being done by any of the existing iSPI packages. Well, that's a case where you would use a custom collection. And you can go into the NNM custom collection definitions, and you can build your own custom collection, and with that, there's one of the tick boxes in there that says push this to NPS, create a reporting package. And when you do that, a short time later, all of that collected data from that point onwards will be stored, and you'll have your own custom collection here. And with that, you get our full set of standard reports. So you can run your own top-end chart on your custom collection, and it's got the same interface as all of the ones that we build, but it's with your data that you chose on your new equipment. And so the custom collections is a very, very powerful feature within the product that allows you to, in a completely automated fashion, build your own full end-to-end BI reporting platform. So you've got the collections built into NNM, you specify the OIDs that you want, the frequency that you want, the filters on the nodes that that collection should be applied to, and then you tell it, record this in NPS and show me the reports. And it's all there out of the box. This one here, I didn't set it up, but if I remember correctly, it's on some sort of Cisco firewall. Let me just open up the options. So FW CFW, yeah.
Damien, while you're pulling that up, somebody asked if you can quickly cover the dashboards.
That would be more than I could cover in the last couple of minutes. I will tell you though, so dashboards are always something that we're actively working on. It's been a feature that's been asked for a lot lately, so we are definitely pushing hard to improve that feature within the product. I can show you here that dashboards, every set of reports includes what we call reportlets, which are basically mini reports, and these are all URL accessible. So for example, there's a little tiny spark line here, and I can click on that, and I can set this up just like it was any other report, the way we already have, but it's very small. It's only got this little line here that's plotting something over time, and then it's got a red dot. Similarly, I've got this simple table. So in the 920 version of the product, the way that you could create a dashboard is look at some of these reportlets, configure them the way you want, and then take the URLs for them. They're all URL addressable, and put them into your own dashboard by building up like a frame-based page. It's not ideal, and I'm not going to stay on the phone and say that it's perfect dashboarding, because it certainly isn't, and it's something that we are actively improving.
All right, and I have one more question that I'm hoping we can squeeze in. Do you expect to see very high levels of disk activity on the NPS server?
Absolutely. Yes, it's one of the key factors in determining the performance of your reports is going to be your speed of disk access. So we always recommend that when you're planning your NPS installation, you get the fastest disks that you possibly can.
And that's all the questions we have at this time.
Okay.
And we can also, by the way, cover a big session on dashboards eventually as well in Vivid.
Yes, yes, absolutely. I will, if I can just add one final note, some of the things that I covered today here, particularly report views and schedules, are included in existing YouTube videos that we've made. And if you search, you'll find them quite easily using like NNM, iSPI performance reports, something like that, and you'll come across them quite easily. And you get to listen to my voice again for another 10 or 15 minutes. So that's it. That's all that I have. And if there's no final questions, then I suppose I'll call this presentation to a close.
Yes, thank you, Damien, for your help, and thank you all for joining. This session has been recorded and will be uploaded to the Vivid site, so anybody can download it at any time and share it around. We appreciate the time that you take out of your day to come and hear our sessions, and we encourage you to join again for future sessions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.